realizing emptiness directly, which means that in the experience, in meditation, when we realize emptiness directly, in that experience, there's no longer a sense of me, the meditator, realizing this object emptiness. There's simply the experience of emptiness. There's no sense of me whatsoever in that experience. Now, because it's a direct realization of emptiness, this is strong enough to start to wipe out mental afflictions and ignorance. But one direct realization of emptiness is not enough to wipe out all ignorance and mental afflictions. But any ignorance and mental afflictions that arise due to what's called intellectually acquired ignorance. Intellectually acquired ignorance is any ignorance about how things exist that we have added in this life through wrong way of thinking. You know, maybe we've heard some teachings from someone and so forth. We think, oh yeah, that's how things are. That is very easy to dispel. That is easily dispelled here at the Path of Seeing. But the more instinctive ignorance that we inherit at the beginning of this life, that's not so easy to get rid of. So one direct realization of emptiness is not going to get rid of that. That's what we do on the next path, the next stage called the path of meditation, and we'll look at that a little bit later. So now that we have a first direct realization of emptiness on this path, before that, of course, on the path of accumulation and preparation, we're a bodhisattva because we have bodhicitta. Then when we have this direct realization of emptiness, we enter the path of seeing. Now we're called an Arya Bodhisattva because we've had our first direct realization of emptiness. This is a very significant point in the spiritual path. And it's often said that from this point, we're on a one-way ticket out of samsara. It's only a matter of time and we're out. So is there any questions on the Mahayana path before we look at the Heart Sutra text? Anything not clear there? Of course, there's a lot more to be said, but I just want to try and keep it as simple as possible. Yeah?
Can you explain more the sentence we call the experience of not finding in our mind when we first turn into the experience of emptiness?
Yeah.
So what we hold is silence inside.
Yeah, right. It's so initially, let's say we're looking for the me, the person. Initially, we have a clear picture. There's me here. So that's the object where we see independent me here. Me that's being praised, me that's being criticized. And then we start looking. And then at some point, if we've been very methodical and complete in our search, we'll come to the point where, oh, not to be found. So that is that not finding is an experience, an absence. But it's not just merely an absence. That absence comes with understanding. So we are resting in that experience of not finding, knowing that it's not that there's no me to be found. So there's not actually a thing that we're looking at. It's an absence of independent me that we are holding with the understanding there's no me to be found. I mean, of course, when we space out, that's an absence, but there's no understanding in that experience.
Also in this absence,
There's
quiet.
It's quiet, but with that is a knowledge. It's an understanding.
Yeah.
It's not just a mere absence. It's what that implies. I mean, of course, and this is what often happens, is when this is explained that emptiness is a absence, then people sit down and meditate and they don't do it correctly, and then their mind goes blank, and they go, oh, I'm realizing emptiness. And all they're doing is just spacing out. Because there's no understanding in that. There's just a sort of voidness.
Spacing out, usually there's in the background there are thoughts. In this blank,
Yeah, but here, as a beginner, again, what will often happen is if we get to this point of not finding, with the understanding it's not to be found, and that absence of me appears, what will just to hold that, what will happen very quickly is some thought will come in, distraction, and then we're sort of off somewhere. So as a beginner, what's recommended is that if we get to that point and we start to hold it, and then quickly we start thinking about breakfast or something, or get distracted, what we are to do is to go back, do the search again. When we don't find, hold it again. This is why the shamatha practice is very important. If we don't have good attention skills, this is what's going to happen. First, probably we're not going to be able to do the search very well. We'll start to search and then we'll start thinking about something. We'll get sleepy. We'll go, oh, where was I? And we'll go back again and do a bit more, and then we'll go off somewhere else. And so the search will not be very thorough and methodical. So then we'll do a bit of search, we'll go off, we'll come back, do a bit more search, off, back, and at the end we'll go, so what now? It's because we haven't done the search in a very clear, methodical way, which means that when we get to the end, we don't understand the implication because we didn't do it in a clear, methodical way. So if we have more focus, concentration through the shamatha practice, we'll be able to do that in a methodical way, which means when we get to the end, we'll go, wow, it's not to be found. Because I've very clearly, it's like trying to solve a very complex problem, many steps. If we get distracted, we're not going to solve it. So when we get to that point, one, we'll know it's not to be found. And then we hold that. Again, if we haven't done shamatha, we're not going to be able to hold it more than a few seconds and then off we go. And what's going to penetrate is the longer we hold that. So if we have some shamatha, we have some concentration, we can hold it longer, it's going to penetrate deeper, which means it'll have more effect after the meditation.
When you say thorough searching,
yeah,
what do you mean?
Right.
What's the search?
So again, we have to be very methodical. For example, so the question is, what do you mean by a thorough or methodical search? We have to be, again, we have to use reasoning and logic here. I mean, if we're not very logically minded, I think we're not going to really come to any result. For example, the analogy I often use is, let's say that you're looking for a person in a house, and you think they're in the house, so you go into the house and look for them. If you don't know how many rooms, and you don't know all the different places you have to look, you may go in there and you look around a bit and you go, well, I didn't see them, but maybe there's a basement or attic, I don't know. So you're not going to conclusively know, because you won't be sure, because maybe I missed a room, maybe not. Yeah. So similarly here, if we're not very analytical, we just look, we don't find, we go, well, maybe it's somewhere else, maybe it's here that I didn't look, or I don't know. So we're not going to have any conclusion. Whereas here, it would be like, this house has 2 rooms. If I look in room A and look in room B, and I don't find them in either of those rooms, I know 100% they're nowhere to be found in the house. Similarly here, 2 places to look, the body and the mind. If I don't find it either there, it's not to be found. So that's why we have to be very methodical about that understanding. Otherwise, if we just sort of happen to look a bit, we go, well, I didn't see it, but maybe it's somewhere else, I don't know. And then it won't have any effect. Same like if you don't really understand all the places you need to look in the house, you may not find, but then you go, well, maybe it's some room I don't know about. Like that.
I'd like to ask about the meaning of emptiness. If you look at the Chinese version, the word that's used can also refer to room or something which leaves room for other things to come in. And when I look at my personal experience, I find that quite useful.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So when we talk here about form is empty, emptiness is form. One way, in a poetic way of talking about that is fullness is emptiness, emptiness is fullness, is a poetic way. So you could say in a poetic way that emptiness is the space which allows everything to appear. And often we see that. We say, poetically, people say things arise out of emptiness. Good. Sometimes, though, that can lead people to a misunderstanding that emptiness is the thing. That, okay, everything's arising out of emptiness, but so therefore emptiness is the only real thing in the universe, because everything comes from that. So there is a possibility of, when using this sort of language, that people then grasp onto emptiness and go, oh, emptiness is real. Everything else is not, but emptiness. So yes, it can be useful, but we have to understand not to misinterpret that way. Yeah, so yes, it can be useful, that way of talking.
We cannot find an independent me.
Right.
Not findable. Is a dependent me findable?
The word findable is another word for independent. That's what independent means, findable. So therefore, when we realise that it's not independent, we realise it's not findable. It's just two different words for the same thing.
Why findable?
So when we say findable here, we have to be careful about this. We are investigating how things exist. So when we talk about findable, we're talking about, can that be found in the basis? We're not saying, can you find a cup on the table? Can you see a cup on the table? That's not what we mean by findable. Findable is, can you find the cup in the basis? So we're talking in terms of how things exist, not what exists. That's conventional. So we can use the word findable in terms of, in a conventional sense, saying, can you find the cup in this room? And you go, yeah, there it is. But that's not the meaning of findable here. Findable is not, can we see a particular thing in some location? We're talking about, can you find the cup in the basis?
But we're not, in the analysis, we're not looking for, does me exist in the basis?
Yes, that's exactly what we're doing.
Labeling, etc.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Looking for me.
Right. And the me, and this is why I mentioned yesterday, and then we'll take a morning tea break. This is what I mentioned yesterday, is that one of the places that we start to go wrong, and this is the most common place where we go wrong in this, is the first step. Is that we're looking for the me that we grasp onto and identify with. And in our behaviour, we grasp onto this independent me. But often what happens is when people start to do the investigation, instead of looking for the me that they're instinctively grasping onto, they start looking for a me according to their belief system. And then, of course, they always find something. But then it's like the analogy often given in the text is that, you know, if you're looking for something in a certain place, you know, in the forest, you look for it somewhere else. I mean, that's not going to help anything. So the key point, this is the most important point in this whole investigation, is to have a clear picture of how we see ourselves existing. That's the me we're looking for. We're not looking for a me according to our belief system, because it's whatever belief system we have in terms of how we think we exist intellectually, that's not what we're identifying with in our behavior. So that's irrelevant. Irrelevant. You know, we can have a belief system that we're subtle energy. We can have a belief system that I'm just a subtle mental continuum. That's irrelevant, because that is not what we're identifying with in our behavior. We're not identifying, as I said yesterday, we're not identifying with subtle energy when we get angry. We're not identifying with subtle mental continuum when we get angry. I'm sure of that. So it's the me we identify, for example, when we get angry. That's the me we need to look for. That me seems very solid, very findable. That's the me we need to look for. If we look for any other me, we're not doing the practice, basically. Okay, time for a morning tea break. So we'll come back at 11:15, and when we do, we'll have a look at this sentence at the bottom of the page 1.